Hello again and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com, and in today's video I'm going to give you a sample TOEFL independent essay. This is a high-scoring essay that I have written myself, and in the video I'm going to just talk about it line by line and sentence by sentence and discuss how I created the essay and what you should do when you're at the test center writing your independent TOEFL essay. All right, first of all, let's check out the question. It says, grades encourage students to work harder at school. Do you agree or disagree? Use specific reasons and examples to support your opinion. So you can see this is a classic agree-disagree style question. This is the most common question style on the TOEFL. It probably gets used about 50% of the time. So be prepared for one of these questions. Now, the first thing I do when I'm writing my essay is I write the introduction. I prefer a 3-sentence introduction. Some teachers will have you write a really long introduction. I disagree with that. I think the introduction should be short and sweet, and you should use most of your time to write long body paragraphs instead. Now, the first sentence in the introduction is what I call the hook. This is a general sentence that introduces the general theme of the essay. In this essay, the general theme is like students and working at school. So I said it is critically important that students work as hard as possible when they are at school. I haven't given my opinion yet. I've just introduced the general topic of the essay. Now, I do get a lot of emails from students who tell me that the hook is for them the most difficult part of the essay. I really think those students are overthinking this sentence. It doesn't have to be really interesting. It doesn't have to be compelling. It just has to be there. Just make a very simple and straightforward hook. You know, if you're totally kind of, lost and you don't know what to write, just say, it is important that. Like, if it's an essay about the best place to raise children, you could say, it is important that children are raised in the best possible environment. If it's an essay about whether you think it's a good idea to work in groups on projects, you could say, it is really important that our group projects are done as effectively as possible. Do you see what I mean? So if you're lost looking for a hook, just use it is very important. That might get you started. All right, after the hook is my thesis. In this case, I wrote, personally, I believe that teachers can motivate students to work hard by giving them grades. So I just very clearly state my overall thesis, my response to the question. And notice that I'm not quoting the prompt. Some students will say, personally, I agree with the statement that grades encourage students to work harder at school. Don't do that. Don't copy the prompt word for word. That might cost you points. Paraphrase it the best you can. And then I end the introduction with, I feel this way for 2 reasons, which I will explore in the following essay. I've basically memorized this sentence, and I use it in every single introduction I write. You can too. Now, as I said, the introduction is pretty short. I haven't mentioned my 2 reasons in the introduction. I don't think you should do that. There's no time. All right, so next up, I start my first body paragraph, and I start it with a topic sentence. In this case, I wrote, to begin with, students who are graded achieve more comprehensive knowledge of academic subjects. This topic sentence is meant to summarize the argument that I make in the rest of the body paragraph. That's the point of the topic sentence. So basically, it's stating your first reason, and it's really summarizing everything you say in the rest of the paragraph. Now, you should begin it with some kind of phrase like to begin with, or first of all, something like that, followed by a comma. After the topic sentence, you should write what I call explanatory sentences. This is one or two or three sentences that kind of go into more detail about this argument. So here I said, when a student has an opportunity to earn grades, he will spend more time working on his assignments and will therefore absorb more information and will achieve more comprehension. Now, what can you notice about this sentence? Well, I'm using fairly long words. I'm using opportunity and assignments and comprehension and information. These are fairly long, like 3-syllable words. They've got a lot of letters. That sort of vocabulary will probably increase your score. But you notice these aren't particularly difficult words. I think like information is a word that, most students will know, and assignments is, again, a word that most students will know. So I'm not trying to use really obscure or complex or advanced vocabulary. I'm just using, some short words and some long words and words that I'm really comfortable with. Sometimes I get essays from students and they've been told by a terrible teacher that they should use really fancy, advanced words, and that always leads to disaster. They're just writing sentences and they have no idea what they mean, and the sentences look like gibberish. As a teacher, I read these essays and I have no idea what they're saying. So keep that in mind. Don't go crazy with your vocabulary. Don't try to be really fancy and advanced. It's not going to work. Use words you're totally comfortable with. All right, what did I say next? On the other hand, students who do not have to worry about their grades won't work very hard and will only superficially understand their subjects. So you notice I used a nice transition phrase, on the other hand. These kinds of phrases are always really useful. On the other hand, for instance, therefore, as a result. Those are words you really, really need to use. So spend some time practicing with those. I guess I used one challenging word, superficially. That's a pretty advanced phrase. But, there's only one so far in this essay, so I'm playing it safe. After that explanatory part, I get to the transitional sentence. My own experience as a student is a compelling example of this. This transitional sentence serves as a bridge between the explanatory sentences and the personal example. So how does the personal example go? During my sophomore year, I had to complete a major assignment in a political science class I was taking. According to the course syllabus, the assignment would make up about half of my total grade in the class, so I approached my work with diligence and care. Well, okay, so what have I done here? Well, I've started my personal example by actually stating when it takes place. I said during my sophomore year. I could have said during my junior year, or I could have even said in 1998, or when I was 18 years old. A phrase that kind of states when your personal example takes place is always a very good way to begin an example. Gives your essay a lot more organization, and it kind of makes it easier for you to tell the story. So think about that. I've used so, which is a coordinating conjunction to create a compound sentence. If you've seen any of my videos about how to write this essay, you know I love these compound sentences. So that's another thing you should do. You need a mix of both simple and compound sentences in your body paragraphs. What comes next? I wrote an amazing speech and spent hours preparing for every possible question my classmates might think of. Okay. When I wrote the first draft of this essay, it said I wrote a good speech. But really boring adjectives like good and bad and big and small, they're something you should avoid. It's usually pretty easy to put in a better adjective. So instead of saying good, just say amazing or wonderful. Again, those are pretty easy words that you probably know how to use, so try them out. What comes next? Well, I think I said, if the presentation had not been graded, I would not have spent so much time preparing for it. I am sure that students all over the world today are motivated to work hard by the chance to achieve high grades from their professors. So I've ended the personal example with what I call a summing up sentence. This is not part of the example, right? This is me sort of repeating the reason, repeating the argument from this paragraph. This is something that is totally optional. If you find that you're a slow writer, I would say that you should cut out this summing up sentence. You can use that time to do proofreading, or you can just use that time to write the example more slowly and think about your grammar and vocabulary. All right, so the second body paragraph starts like this. Secondly, grades motivate students because they are a way to determine which people in a group are objectively most intelligent. So again, I've summed up my argument here. So you know that the whole argument here is going to be about figuring out who is the most intelligent. Grades are assigned in a systematic way, so they clearly demonstrate which students in a class are the best and brightest. Okay, what have I done here? Well, I've used one more advanced kind of challenging word, systematic. Now, I've used two difficult words, just two. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. Don't go crazy with the vocabulary. Use one, use two difficult words, but not much more than that. I've used an idiom here down below, the best and brightest. Idioms are fine. Make sure you know how to use them properly. Idioms probably will increase your score if used well, but, a lot of non-native speakers struggle with them, so be careful about idioms. And then I start my personal example right away. And this time I'm not using a whole transitional sentence, I'm just using a phrase, for example. For example, in my freshman year, I took a literature class where students merely got a pass or fail at the end. So as you can see, I began this example by stating when it takes place, in my freshman year. Since only a moderate amount of effort was required to pass the class, I completed my assignments and presentations quite half-heartedly. In contrast, and again, this is one of those transitional phrases that you must use. In contrast, therefore, as a result, you got to use those phrases. When I took a graded class on the same subject in my junior year, I spent hours in the library researching my papers so that I could show my professors that I was intellectually superior to my classmates. I do want to emphasize here that you probably shouldn't repeat words too much. So, I said papers, I said assignments and projects. I'm not just saying assignments. So I changed that to papers here. I could have said essays, right? That sort of variation in your vocabulary will also help your score. This may appear somewhat shallow, but in today's competitive academic environment, it is absolutely necessary for people to distinguish themselves. Again, this is a summing up sentence, which kind of is separate from the personal example, but it does sort of repeat the main argument from the paragraph using slightly different words. Now, at the end of the essay, a very short conclusion, just 2 sentences. In conclusion, I strongly believe that grades encourage students to learn. This is because they force students to learn as much as possible, and because they give young learners a way to distinguish themselves from their peers. So the first sentence in the conclusion restates my thesis, restates my main argument from the beginning of the essay, but uses slightly different words. And then the last sentence of the conclusion repeats the 2 arguments. Here's the first argument. Here's the second argument. And again, I'm paraphrasing them. I'm using slightly different words. I don't want you to copy these topic sentences when you write the conclusion, right? No copy paste. Don't do it word for word. State the same idea with slightly different words. And that's all you need for a conclusion. It's going to be pretty short. Overall, the word count here was 412 words. That's actually probably a perfect length for most people. I generally recommend about 380 to 400 words. A little bit less, a little bit more, that's okay. But don't write much more than this. You absolutely don't need to. I get essays sometimes that are like 500 words, 600 words, 700 words, and the student is writing so quickly that they make a ton of mistakes. So I do recommend you write about 400 words in total, more or less. All right. I guess that's all I'm going to say, but if you want to get a website version of this essay, I'll put a link down below in the video description. I'll also put a link to my overall guide to writing this task and my essay templates. I do want to emphasize here that there is no single way to write a TOEFL essay. Like some students say, should I write 2 paragraphs or should I write 3 paragraphs? Like 3 body paragraphs. And my response is, it doesn't matter. You can write 2 or you can write 3. As long as your ideas are good and as long as your grammar is good, your score will be high. Now, sometimes they'll be like, oh, teacher, should I write in conclusion or should I write to sum it up? And I say, shut up. That's a stupid question. It doesn't matter. You could say in conclusion. You could say to sum it up. You could say overall. Don't focus on those teeny tiny little details. What really matters is the strength of your grammar, the strength of your vocabulary, and whether or not your arguments are effectively addressing the question you've been given. So keep that in mind. I want you to write grammatically solid essays. I bet you could ignore all of the advice I've given you here, and as long as your essay has perfect grammar, you could probably get 30 points. I hesitate to say that, but it's probably true. So focus on your grammar as well as all this stuff I've just said. All right, I am going to leave it at that, but again, check the video description for some helpful links. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment down below. I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. Take care, guys, and I'll see you next week with a new video.